You know, there are some stories that just don't sit right. Not because they are confusing, but because they are too clear. And this one feels like something that should never happen. Yet somehow, it is. Because what you're about to hear isn't something buried in the past. This isn't an old scandal being dragged back up for views. No, this is happening right now. And the more you look into it, the more uncomfortable it becomes. At first, it sounds like a family dispute. That's what people will tell you. Just a disagreement. Just tension. But the deeper you go, the more that narrative completely falls apart. Because this isn't just conflict, this feels calculated, deliberate, and honestly, a little bit terrifying. Let me ask you something. What kind of system allows a situation where a child, a victim, ends up losing her home right after the truth comes out? Think about that for a second. A 9-year-old girl already dealing with trauma, and then suddenly, she's facing homelessness too. How does that even happen? Because that's exactly where this story begins to unravel. It starts with a father. A man who reaches a point where staying silent is no longer an option. A man who decides, enough is enough. Paul Caldwell's not just a parent, he's a pastor. Someone who spent his life guiding others, protecting others. But this time, it's his own child who needs protecting. And what he's dealing with. No parent should ever have to face that. So he does something incredibly difficult. He goes to the authorities. Not quietly, not indirectly. He takes it straight to the people who are supposed to deliver justice. And before that, he does something even more powerful. He confronts the man responsible. There's a phone call recorded. And in that moment, everything changes. Because the suspect doesn't deny it. There's no confusion. No hesitation. Just a calm, almost casual admission. An apology that feels empty, detached. Like the weight of what's being said just doesn't exist. And just like that, the truth is out. Not speculation, not rumor. A confession. Soon after, there's an arrest. And at that point, you'd expect things to move in a certain direction. Right? You'd expect support for the victim, protection for the family, some level of empathy, at the very least. But that's not what happens. Because this is where everything takes a turn that nobody was prepared for. The suspect posts bond, walks out, and instead of stepping back, instead of laying low, he goes on the offensive. Not against strangers, not against the system, against the very people who spoke up. And what happens next feels almost unreal. Within days, not weeks, not months, days, the entire family is told to leave their home. 30 days. That's it. Imagine hearing that. After everything, after making the hardest decision of your life, now you have a countdown over your head, and it's not just the father. It's everyone, including that 9-year-old girl, the same child this all started for. And if that doesn't make your stomach turn, this next part will, because there's leaked audio, and in that recording, there's no anger. No shouting. No emotional breakdown. Instead, there's laughter, casual conversation. Like they're discussing weekend plans, deadlines are mentioned, renovations are discussed. At one point, there's even talk about turning the property into a rental. A business opportunity, while the people living there are being pushed out. Including a child who's already been through more than enough. And the tone, that's what really gets people. It's not just what's being said, it's how it's being said. Because there's no empathy. None. No hesitation. No moment of maybe we shouldn't do this. Just detachment, cold, clinical. Like it's all just part of a plan. And that's when people start to realize this isn't just about removing someone from a property. This is pressure, real pressure. Because when most people hear the phrase witness intimidation, they picture threats, aggression, violence. But that's not always how it works, the most effective kind. It doesn't leave marks. It doesn't need to. It goes after something much deeper, your stability, your ability to survive. Because if your world starts collapsing around you, how do you focus on anything else? How do you keep fighting? How do you stand in court when you don't even know where your family will sleep next week? And that's what makes this so disturbing. Because suddenly, everything lines up. The timing, the eviction, the tone in that audio. It all starts to feel less like coincidence and more like strategy. Because think about it. If you wanted to stop someone from speaking out, you wouldn't necessarily threaten them directly. You'd overwhelm them. You'd create chaos. You'd force them into survival mode. Because once someone is fighting just to stay afloat, justice becomes a luxury. And that's exactly what this looks like. A shift in focus from truth to survival, from accountability to damage control. And then it gets even worse, because it's not just about being told to leave. There are discussions about utilities, water, electricity, basic necessities, and the idea of cutting them off. Now think about that for a second. That's not just eviction. That's making a place unlivable. That's forcing someone out faster, creating urgency, pressure, desperation, especially when children are involved. Because without those essentials, a house isn't just uncomfortable. It's unsafe. And when you hear that being discussed so casually, it hits differently. It doesn't feel reactive. It feels planned. And then comes the part that really unsettles people. The reaction from within the family. Because in that audio, there's a moment that stands out. A voice light, almost cheerful. A giggle. Kendra Duggar, and that's what shocks people the most. Because this isn't distant. This is personal. Her own younger sister is the victim. And yet, there's laughter. No visible conflict. No emotional weight, just participation. And that raises a question that's hard to ignore. How does someone get to that point? Because this isn't just about one decision. This is about mindset. Environment. Conditioning. In certain family structures, loyalty isn't optional, obedience isn't questioned. And over time, that kind of environment can reshape how people think, how they respond, even how they feel. Because when you're taught that authority must be protected at all costs, anyone who challenges it, even your own family, can start to feel like the enemy. And once that shift happens, actions that would normally feel unthinkable start to feel justified. Or at the very least, acceptable. And that's when things become dangerous, because now, it's not just about one situation. It's about a pattern, control through resources, housing, money, support, all becoming tools. And then, just when the situation couldn't feel more intense, there's one more twist. The family tries to fight back. Not with aggression, not with retaliation, but by asking for help. A fundraisers created a way to survive. To relocate. To protect their child. And for a moment, it works. People start noticing, support begins to grow, donations come in, hope starts to build, and then, suddenly, it's gone. The fundraiser disappears. No clear explanation. No warning, just gone, and with it, their lifeline. Because without financial support, everything becomes harder. Legal battles, moving, basic survival. And that's how pressure really works. Not in one big moment, but in layers. You push, you restrict. You remove support. Until eventually, the person on the other side is just exhausted. And when you step back and look at the full picture, it's hard not to feel uneasy. Because this isn't just about what happened in the past. This is about what's happening now. Real people, real consequences, real pressure being applied in real time. And the uncomfortable truth is this: you don't always need threats. When you can control someone's reality, you don't need force. When you can take away stability. And if situations like this are allowed to continue, then justice starts to look very different. It becomes something not everyone can reach, something not everyone can afford. And that's the part that should concern all of us. Because if speaking out leads to losing everything, how many people will stay silent? How many already have? So now I want to hear from you. When you look at everything, the timing, the actions, the tone, the pressure, what do you think is really going on here? Because this story, it's not finished, not even close. You ever hear a story that just doesn't leave your mind? Not because it's complicated, but because it feels too real, and honestly, a bit too dark to ignore. This is one of those stories. And I'm warning you now, once you understand what's actually happening here, you're not going to look at it the same way again. Because this isn't some old headline being recycled. This isn't drama from years ago that people are digging up for clicks. No, this is happening right now, right in front of us. And most people still haven't fully processed just how serious it is. At first glance, it sounds like a family issue. That's what people will say. A disagreement. A misunderstanding. But the moment you start connecting the dots, that explanation completely falls apart. Because what we're looking at here doesn't feel accidental. It feels controlled, calculated, and honestly, a little bit chilling. Let me ask you something. If a child becomes a victim of something serious, shouldn't the system protect them? Shouldn't their safety come first? No matter what, then explain this. How does a situation exist where a 9-year-old girl, after everything she's been through, ends up at risk of losing her home? Think about that. Not just the trauma, but the instability that comes right after it. Because that's exactly where this story begins to break apart. It starts with a father who reaches a point where silence is no longer an option, Paul Caldwell, a man known for guiding others, for standing firm in his beliefs. But now, facing something no parent should ever have to face. This isn't theory, this isn't rumor, this is his child. And at some point, he makes a decision that changes everything. He decides to speak up, not quietly, not indirectly. He goes straight to the authorities. Now think about how difficult that must be, because speaking up doesn't just bring attention, it brings consequences. It brings pressure. It brings exposure, and sometimes it brings backlash. But before even taking that step, he does something else, something bold, something risky. He confronts the man responsible. There's a phone call, and it's recorded. Now pause for a second and really picture that moment. A father speaking directly to the person accused of harming his child. There's tension. There's emotion, and there's one question hanging in the air. Will he deny it? Will he try to twist the story? But that's not what happens, because what comes next is what shocks everyone. There's no denial. No panic. No confusion, just a calm response. An admission, almost casual, like the weight of what's being said isn't fully there, and then an apology, but not the kind that feels real, not the kind that carries guilt. It feels empty, detached. And in that moment, everything changes, because now, this isn't just suspicion anymore. It's confirmed. A confession. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. Soon after, authorities step in. An arrest is made. And at that point, you'd expect things to follow a certain path. You'd expect protection for the victim, support for the family. At the very least, some sense of stability. But what actually happens next is where this story takes a turn that no one saw coming, because instead of things calming down, everything escalates fast. The suspect posts bond, walks free, and instead of stepping back, instead of letting the situation unfold legally, he makes a move. A very deliberate move, and it's not aimed at the system. It's aimed at the people who spoke up. And what happens next feels less like a reaction and more like a warning. Within days, not weeks, days, everything changes for that family. A deadline appears. 30 days. That's all they get. 30 days to leave their home. Now stop for a second and imagine that you've just gone through one of the hardest moments of your life. You've spoken out. You've done what you believe is right, and suddenly you're the one facing consequences, not the person who caused the harm. And it's not just the father. It's the entire family, including the 9-year-old girl at the center of it all. The same child who should be protected is now facing uncertainty, instability, and the possibility of losing the one place that should feel safe. And that's why people start asking questions, serious questions, because the timing here, it doesn't feel random. It feels immediate, calculated, like a response designed to send a message. And whether people want to admit it or not, that message is loud and clear: speak up, and your life changes overnight. And that's just the beginning of it, because what comes next only makes things darker, much darker. And this is where things start to feel a lot darker. Because up until now, you could still tell yourself, maybe this is just bad timing, maybe it's all a coincidence. But then, the leaked audio comes out, and everything changes, because what people expected to hear was tension, maybe anger, maybe even regret. But that's not what's there. What you hear instead is calm, casual conversation. Like nothing serious is even happening. They are talking about the eviction, discussing deadlines. And then comes the part that really hits people. They start talking about renovating the property and turning it into a rental. Just think about that for a second. On one side, a family is being pushed out of their home, and on the other side, there's a conversation about turning that same home into profit. And the tone, completely normal. No empathy. No hesitation, just planning. And that's when people start to realize, this isn't just an eviction. This feels like pressure. The kind of pressure that doesn't look aggressive, but quietly breaks everything around you, because when you're home, your stability, your entire situation starts collapsing. How do you focus on justice? You don't. You focus on surviving, and maybe that's the point. Then there's another layer to this. Talk about cutting off utilities, water, electricity, basic necessities, and at that point, it's no longer just asking someone to leave. It's making it impossible for them to stay. Forcing them out. Fast, and when you put all of this together, it stops feeling random. It starts to feel controlled, deliberate, and then there's one moment that really unsettled people. A light laugh. In the middle of all this, Kendra Duggar, her own younger sister, is at the center of everything, and yet, there's no clear emotion in her voice. And that's what people can't understand, because at that point, This isn't just about actions anymore. It's about mindset. And when that mindset shifts far enough, the line between right and wrong starts to dissipate.